Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has definitely hit the ground running, just as he promised to, during the election campaign season that brought him to office. Now, Tinubu has wasted no time in implementing his economic agenda for the country. In his first 30 days in office, he has taken some bold and controversial decisions that have shaken up the status quo and generated mixed reactions from Nigerians and the international community. From the withdrawal of petrol subsidy to the unification of the naira, the president has not slowed down in implementing his plans for the country. This has, however, created untold hardship on citizens that have been lamenting on the high cost of living since his decisions have been generated. Well, joining us on the morning show today as we look at Tinubu's first 30 days in office is Tilewa Adebajo, a finance expert and the CEO of the CFG Advisory. Welcome to the morning show. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you.
Yes, well, as we reflect on the president's first 30 days in office, I mean, we've already highlighted some things there, the unification of the naira, and of course, the removal of fuel subsidy. We're looking at these key policies, economic policies that have been introduced that is supposed to signal the direction of this current administration's agenda. I would like to know what your overview is about it, even as Nigerians understand the removal of fuel subsidy, but they don't like the effects that fuel subsidy has on their lives. What is your overview on that?
On the subsidy or on the policies?
On the subsidy, let's start from subsidy.
Okay, well, let us understand why the subsidy became a major issue. We were spending close to $10 to $15 billion a year on the subsidies. At a point in time when oil prices hit $100 a barrel, instead of Nigeria getting a windfall from that to be able to put a surplus into our fiscal budgets, we were suffering a loss and we were borrowing excessively. So it was a zero-sum game for the country. In fact, we were piling up debt at a point in time where we should have been recording a surplus. So when you have a situation whereby the books don't balance anymore, then you have to be able to bring out the source of that revenue. So the 96% of the revenues of the country was going towards debt service, not to talk about funding recurrent expenditure or capital expenditure. So we were in a significant deficit position, and we had significant ways and means financing of close to 23.7 trillion or more. So it was a situation whereby something had to give, because I'm sure that even in our households, you cannot spend 96% of your salary just to pay debt, because you need money that you're going to keep for consumption, and you also need money that you're also going to put aside for investments. We were not doing that. So hence the subsidy was the first thing or the easiest thing to go to relieve the pressure. Because if we didn't do that, our economy was going to start heading towards the level of Zimbabwe and Venezuela with hyperinflation. So we had reached a point whereby it was no longer sustainable.
All right, I mean, I understand why she's not interested in the subsidy thing. Everybody's feeling the effect. But I want to, we'll come back to it, but I'd like you to look holistically at the policies of the president in the first 1 month. Of course, subsidy removal will be part of it, but I will imagine that that's just part of his, shall we say, energy, policies on the energy and the oil and gas sector on the one hand, and of course, how to conserve and make more money, for revenue. But in terms of the policy directions, what people are basically saying, especially those who are in support of what the president has done, is to say that he has hit the ground running, which has become something of a cliche, and that he's been bold and courageous. Is that what you see in his first 1 month, or you think that could there be a well-orchestrated propaganda as to endear the president to the people before we have the opportunity to subject those policies, to rigorous analysis. What are your specific thoughts on those policies?
Well, you've made a very valid point in the sense that we need to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. And quite clearly, it's important to understand that the economy that was inherited was an economy that was in serious stagflation, which is low growth, high unemployment, and high inflation. So to be able to get out of stagflation, you need some structural reforms. So what you found out was that the previous administration had set the bar so low that, and these issues had already set Nigeria back significantly, not only from the local economy, but also from the external economy, that these reforms were definitely obvious. So in coming in the first 30 days and articulating the policies, and not only articulating it, but going ahead with the implementation of the subsidy removal and, of course, the unification of exchange rates, I think what we tend to do then was you found a situation whereby those were two critical pressure points. So he has relieved that pressure. And you can begin to see that from that pressure coming up, you now see how the financial markets are begun to react to that. There is now a convergence between what you call the parallel markets and the official rates. So there's no official rate of differential within the foreign exchange system. So the arbitrage opportunities for round tripping and all those things have been eliminated now.
Totally?
Yes. In fact,
you will say that they've been eliminated.
Yes, definitely. Totally. So you find out that even the bank rate or the official rate is now even slightly higher than the parallel market rates. And interbank transactions, I think, are beginning to come up. So that one singular step, the financial markets have reacted positively towards that. So that in itself, those two things have eased the pressure, and you've set a policy direction. Also, they have articulated the economic policy. There was a document which we'll be discussing next week on their policy direction, which was chaired by Senator Tokunbo Abiru and had Dr. Yemi Cardozo, and they did with KPMG, which they articulated their economic policy direction. So it's very clear what they've said they want to do on monetary policy, fiscal policy, and also trade policy alignment. So they've articulated those policies in a document which was done in May. And then the first two steps of that is the subsidy removal and the foreign exchange management. And the fact that they've done that has sent a very strong signal to not only the financial markets, but to both local and domestic investors and the economy as a whole. So now what you are saying now is that how do we now manage the fallout? Because the fallout of this is the fact that we're going to have serious inflationary pressures. And right now, inflation at about 23.5% is at an 18-year high.
Absolutely.
So, and we have not seen the effect of the subsidy removal and the foreign exchange conversion on the inflation rate. It hasn't been reflected in these inflation rates. So what we're trying to see is that inflation is definitely going to go up. And now it's a question of what program do you have in place within the central bank to manage inflation. So those are the sort of things we need to now begin to talk about. How do you begin to cushion the effects of these actions?
When you say cushion effects, I'm sorry, because this aspect of it is very important. When you say that there are two key pressure points that have been removed in order to relieve government, but those two key pressure points have been transferred to the people. First is the subsidy removal from 195, it was meant to be 185 in many cities with access, to 488, 525, 585 kind of a thing. It's pressure to you and I. I'm not so sure how much of the pressure you were feeling, but to Sheita and I and many other people. Unification of the foreign exchange means that everybody is now dealing with the dollar at 7-something, 8-something. People are saying that maybe it might go to 1,000. So much so that as at now, what we're hearing is that an economy ticket out of Nigeria to Europe or to the US has moved from 800 and something to 2.2 million. So even for the middle class or upper middle class people, everybody is feeling the pressure. Is that success, though? Yes, you're saying that let's manage it. But then when you remove those pressure points from the government and put it directly on the people who have been dealing with a lot for years, how is that progress?
Well, we're saying that what is happening is the fact that we haven't been living in the reality in the Nigerian economy. The Nigerian economy has been distorted for quite a while, and that is why you see that we have not seen consistent level of growth. Let's take an instance. In 2014, we had a growth of 7.5%. Inflation was at 9% then. You see, when inflation is at low, then you create value for your populace. Right now, with inflation at 23%, the real rates are negative. Okay, so any investment you're making now, interest rates is at 18%, inflation at 23%. So those real rates are negative. Even your real yield is negative. If you're not yielding anything above 23%, it's negative. So inflation is a killer, and it devalues any economy. So we have been very inconsistent with managing inflation in our economy. If you see what happened also, there's a very high correlation between when the ways and means financing exploded and the level of inflation. Yeah. In 2019, inflation was brought down to 11%.
11%, yeah.
But when they doubled the ways and means financing, and within those 2 years, inflation went from 11 to 23%. So inflation doubled as a result of the ways and means financing.
You need to break that down for us.
Yes,
so the ways and means we're hearing of trillions.
Yes.
Does it come down to money that was not appropriated for, that you just asked the central bank to fund?
It was printed, yes. So that's the printing of the money. But what they were doing was actually printing the differential between what they were debiting the banks for from CRR. So the CRR was what they were using for ways and means financing, and anything above that was what they were printing. So when you have inflation, you devalue your economy, you devalue people. And when you have a distorted economy, we need to be able to face real prices. So you see, if you haven't done all these things to let the pricing find their levels, then it becomes quite difficult. So, but when you begin to bring down inflation, as you're seeing, this ticket price you're talking about, once you remove the subsidy, for instance, if government brings in $10 billion into the system, if they had brought it in at 400 to 1, which was the official exchange rate, that would have been 4-point-something trillion. If they bring it in at 700, that would be 7-point-something trillion. So even government itself has more money to spend with the exchange rate, because it changes its oil revenues in dollars to naira. So if it was changing it at 400, it will be getting less. But now they're changing it at 700, they're getting more money. So you see, once government has more money, then they can begin to intervene in social infrastructure such as health and education to be able to impact people. So you want to transfer the subsidy from just fuel subsidy into impactful subsidy payments, which is really where you make the impact. So the challenge the government has is to manage inflation. If you can manage it, because people are saying that inflation is going to be temporary, it's not going to be temporary. I mean, these are significant increases in prices. Yeah. So you are seeing inflation moving to close to 30% easily.
If that happens, will we survive?
We can't survive. You see, for me, I don't see anything about survival. It's a question of managing your economy. You already know the impact of something. So you need to be able to plan how you're going to, what are the key drivers of inflation in Nigeria? Okay, the inflation in Nigeria is not your typical inflation of too much money chasing too few goods. Yeah. Because we do not have the consumer purchasing power. Okay, we have 40% unemployment, we have low productivity. And if you check the accounts according to NDIC, maybe only 1% or 2% of the population have more than 500,000 naira saved in their accounts. So it's we have very low savings rates, and so it's a very tight situation for us. So our inflation is more of not demand pull, which is what you know about too much money chasing too few goods, but it's price driven. Okay, ways and means is driving it, food inflation is driving it, and now subsidies. Those are the three things that are going to drive our inflation. So the central bank really needs to sit down and, organize its policies. That is why the subsidy removal is important, because now government has money in its hands, in terms of maybe, because with the exchange rate at 7 trillion, if you bring in 10 trillion, you wipe out the deficit for this year. So government should stop financing a deficit budget. So if the government prepares its budget for next year, which is what is important, because not much is going to change between now and the end of this year. Because government now has to get a handle on what it's going and prepare its budget for next year to be able to see something that is impactful. So it's now a question of management, really, at the end of the day.
Really a grim reality, for me just listening to you now. But I would say one of the critical concerns for Nigeria's economy has been the issue of diversification. Now, in the first 30 days that the president has been in office, do you think that there has been, in the setting of his agenda to promote diversification and reduce the country's dependence, or some would say over-dependence on oil production? And what further measures do you believe that maybe he should take to achieve a meaningful diversification, so that I guess we can find other ways and means to, bring money and funding into other ways and means.
Okay. By ways and means, I'm sure you don't mean by printing more money.
Of course not. Of course not.
You've raised a very interesting point. And you see, the diversity of our economy is not... the oil, in the last budget, oil revenues only contributed 30% to the revenues. We had a revenue projection of 10 trillion naira from the last budget, and oil revenues was only about 30% of that. So we have been successful in diversifying that economy in terms of our revenue sources. But the problem is the fact that for foreign exchange, we're 90% dependent on foreign revenues. So we need to diversify. What we need to focus on diversifying is our export base, so that we're exporting more, not only just crude oil, because crude oil accounts for 90% of our foreign revenues. So we need to expand our export base to be able to make sure that we have more sources of foreign exchange, and also increase foreign direct investments. That is very critical. So, but when your economy lacks any confidence, is also another important issue. Because if you do not have confidence in the economy, not only do the domestic investors themselves do not expand, the businesses here will not build new factories, they will not expand, they will just try to manage themselves within what they have. But when there's confidence, the local manufacturers are the ones who will start to expand. Then the foreigners will see there's an opportunity and they will come. But unfortunately, the problem with Nigeria is inconsistency in policies. The last 8 years has set us back maybe another 15 years. So if you now bring in consistent policies now, it will take a while. There are no quick fixes. When it's good, we like to say what's happening in the first 30 days, what's happening in the first 100 days. But as far as the economy is concerned, the signaling and the telegraphing is positive. We've seen the plans. But what is important is that we need to understand that it's not a quick fix. Okay, it's a slow grind, and you need to be able to show some consistencies and some sort of confidence. So that is, where we find ourselves today.
All right. I mean, it sounds to me like the new president is coming in to undo many of the wrong moves of the man that he helped install 8 years ago, which is not a bad thing, in itself. But then, from what you have said, how this impact is mitigated will now be the issue. So you mentioned about how CBN will need to be on top of the monetary matter. So I'm asking you, what quality of people do you think that will be able to assist the president? We're hearing that by next week it is possible that he might come out with a list of his ministers. Of course, the Minister of Finance will be there, Minister of Investment and Trade, Minister of Budget. The current CBN governor is under investigation and under suspension. He will need to appoint another one if he dispenses eventually with this one. We have seen that he had approval for 20 special advisors, but 1 month, in the saddle, it's only 10 that he's been able to appoint. We do not know what might cause the delay. How fast do you think he should move in this direction so that it is not only the president and a few people that we are looking at, and what quality of people do you envisage that will be able to do far better than the previous government that has brought so much hardship to the country?
Interesting question. There's definitely a need for square pegs and round pegs.
Yeah.
And we need to ensure that we don't put round pegs in square holes, as we've seen before. And we need to be able to restore confidence in the institution, which is the Central Bank of Nigeria, because there was clear violations of Section 38 of the CBN Act, which was rather unfortunate. There were clear violations of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. So when you have laws, it's important that we don't violate those laws and we do not debase institutions, because when you debase institutions, what happened before happened. So it's important that you need to restore confidence, and by putting, not only by appointing the right people in the right places, but also you need to be able to show consistency and confidence in what you are doing. The plan, like I said before, has been articulated. We'll discuss that next week. But again, you need to put the right people there, and you need to be able to show commitment to leadership. And one of the things that was in the plan, they said, was about coordination and monitoring. And I think they've committed to the fact that the president himself will coordinate the key ministries and have a coordinating department. And they've also talking about performance management. In terms of appointing all the special...
You've seen this document?
Yes, we have the National Economic Policy document which they've put together, and we'll discuss that extensively next week. But they have already set out the agenda, and they've already said what they're going to do. So it's clear that we know what new things they want to do to be able to ensure that the economy is being coordinated properly, and not only the economy, but all the other ministries too are being effectively monitored. So it seems that some of these special advisors that you're seeing now will evolve into ministers. And maybe new ones might come into play. But there's also a process that needs to go through. Also, there was a sequence. The old Senate or the old Assembly, their term ended later than...
That's right.
So there are a lot of sequencing that we'll see. So what is important, I think, is that we already see their plan. They've articulated their plan. So it's now a question to see the people that are going to come in to implement this plan and what is going to happen. But for me, I think what we should look at is that, yes, the two key pressure points, as we've said, they've done that, which I think there's been a lot of positive responses to that. But again, like I said, inflation is going to go to 30%, and it's not going to be a temporary inflation. It's probably going to take about a year or so for us to get a handle on inflation. But what I think is most important is that they need to start to focus on their medium-term economic framework, because this is a budget they've inherited. So right now, they need to put their people there. We need to understand the extent of this problem, because we don't know what the debt profile really is. So we need to get an independent review of that for them to come up with. 80 trillion we're hearing. Exactly. So all this issue about, is it 77 trillion now? Or we need to understand and get a handle of that. They need to translate all these policy documents into actionable plans. The people who are there need to work towards that. And when they come out with their budget at the end of the year, I think that is what we will now be able to use to be able to see exactly what they're doing. Because we now have a new budget, we see where the consolidation is, and hopefully it's not a budget that there will be a lot of deficit financing in. We know that, for instance, a lot of the revenues have been accounted for on swap deals, so there's not a lot of room for money for them now. So a lot of revenues will not be able to be available to them until next year. But I think what is important is that with these policies that the government is putting together, there are two milestones. the UN General Assembly is coming up in September. Okay. So, the president and his team really need to be able to prepare a speech to the world that will showcase Nigeria's policy and direction, not only on foreign policy, but also on economic policy. And on the sideline of these meetings, I think it's important that we need to be able to approach key investors, foreign investors, to send them a signal as to our readiness for change and reform. Because it's also important that we sell our program to the world. So that assembly, and on the sideline of those UN General Assembly meetings, it's important that we sell Nigeria to the world. Then we come back home, and we also need to be able to convince our business community. And we need to encourage our own SMEs here, which contribute about 50% of our GDP. You need to put in those policies in place because this inflation and all these fuel prices are going to impact them the most.
Directly.
So, and we need to be able to put in a situation whereby they know that they can also function. So that by the time the budget comes out, it's a budget that is bought in. The next milestone will be by the first quarter of next year when the IMF Article 4 report comes in. So that when that IMF Article 4 report is written, there should be an endorsement of our policies. Because right now we have challenges with our international credit rating. And it's important that once that Article 4 report comes out from the IMF, we can signal to the world that yes, Nigeria is on the track of reform. So a lot of our credit rating agencies should begin to review our credit ratings as positive, and we should begin to look at getting a better credit rating because we are paying a lot now for our foreign debt because of our very low credit rating, which is at junk bond status. So those are the things that we need to do to restore confidence. So like I said, it's good we're talking about this now, but these are good signalings, good startings, but it's a long haul. And the budget that will come out for this government will be what we need to be able to expect. That is when we can begin to see the seriousness, because not only at that time would you have the budget, but you'd also have the team in place that will implement that budget and will be able to run with those policies within the first year.
But what do you say to those who are scared that once we start appealing to your IMFs and to your World Banks and to international agencies like that, finance agencies like that, it is the people, it is the ordinary people that will bear the brunt?
It's not so. We have this misconception, okay? Nobody forces you to borrow money. Okay, the IMF have loans.
You have to pay back.
Okay, nobody says you should go and take their money. You borrow money domestically here too. The government borrows money here. Yeah. We issue treasury bills.
That's right.
But whatever money you buy, you have to pay it back. So when you talk about the IMF borrowing money and they're looking at it's like a bank. By the time you have 96% of your revenues using to service debt, if Nigerian government was a private company, the bank would have called the loans and shut it down. The only reason why you survive is because you're a sovereign. So you don't need to wait for the IMF, because we need to restructure our debt profile now.
Yeah.
And we can do it. If you wait for the IMF to come and restructure it for you, they will call in the Paris Club and the London Club. Look at what has happened to Ghana. They've defaulted on their bond. So they went and borrowed money and they couldn't pay it back, and then why are you blaming them? Why are you blaming them? So, they didn't force you to come and take their money, but you need to be able to show to these countries that you have fiscal responsibilities and you're able to manage your finances properly. That is why investors come in, because they know you have fiscal discipline. But so we need to move away from that, because these World Bank loans are very good. 30-year loans at interest of 2%. You can't find that anywhere. You understand what I said? They are heavily concession loans. And the World Bank tries to put these loans into development projects. Let us use it to build our hospitals, our roads, and then pay it back over 30 years. Those kind of loans, you can't find them anywhere. So when you get those concessionary loans and you still cannot pay back, then you know that you, as a government or a country, you have challenges. So I think we should leave the IMF alone. We should focus on our own internally generated economic policies and instill our fiscal discipline. and and that is what we need to focus on.
I mean, very quickly before we go, I think it's interesting that you mentioned in the future the fact that the UN General Assembly is coming up and that we could take advantage of that summit. But a lot of people would throw back to the new global financial pact that was, when our president went to Paris. And, that particular summit was supposed to be an opportunity for the country to look at how it can restore fiscal space, and how it can, of course, look at difficult short-term financial challenges as well, and mobilize innovative financing for countries that are vulnerable to climate change and to low-income countries like Nigeria. When Dele Alake came out to talk about what had been going on there, it was very vague in the sense where he said, "Oh yes, this is why we're here," but we didn't necessarily seem to hone down on exactly what deals were made or how exactly that summit impacted Nigeria. Are you satisfied with what the president was able to achieve while he was in Paris, France?
Like I told you, that's a photo op. It's a photo op and it's a Photoshop, and it's more on a climate change issue that was called by the French government, and it's more of French diplomacy, so it's not something that, they're looking at that and they're talking to people. Janet Yellen came in from the States, and so they had a few global players, but it was more of a talk shop and a photo op to be able to follow up on issues. But when you get to substantive issues, then you're talking about getting to the UN, you're getting to the World Bank, you're getting to the IMF. Those are the people that make those decisions at a global level, and your one-on-one bilateral issues with how do we engage the United States, how do we engage the UK or the EU as a group. How do you engage China? So our diplomacy is very important, because not only are you looking at engaging these countries, but there are trade-related issues there. Because your trade policy is very important, because you're not only talking about monetary policy, you're talking about fiscal policy, but you also have to put your trade policy in there. And it is trade policy that is international. And that is where international diplomacy is very important with your trade policies and how you work things out. China, for instance, devalues their currency and ensures that their currency is devalued against the US dollar. Why? Because they're a big exporter to America, and they always want to make sure that their currency is cheaper than America, so that their goods can have value to the Americans. But we are complaining that our currency is devalued, but China always wants to make sure that its currency is weaker than the dollar, because it's a strategic trade policy for them. So we need to develop along those lines and understand what is in our interest and align our economies and our diplomacy along those lines. So those two things go in hand. Yes, it's good we go to those things, but it's not one of the major events that will be able to deliver things. It is these things like the UN General Assembly, because there you have other heads of states that you can meet with on a one-on-one basis to be able to do your deals and talk about what you want to do, how you want to go about it, what you require from them. So it's a good start, but good photo op, good talk shop, but the main thing is the UN General Assembly and the World Bank meetings that we attend.
All right. Okay, let's wrap up on this note and just a combination of questions that are related. This is a belt tightening period for many Nigerians, almost like austerity measures or structural adjustment programs. What will you say to government? That's part one. When you demand of citizens to say, understand with us, it will get better. But we need you to know that you will spend more, you will save less, and things will be tough while we're at it. How about government? How are you cutting costs? Are you ensuring that when you come visiting as a president, we do not see 110 or 124 motorcade kind of a thing, or a new speaker of the House of Representatives, appointing 34 special advisors and things like that? The sort of lifestyle, the sort of imagery that we see. Shouldn't citizens demand of government to also cut costs? That's one. Two is that what will you say to ordinary people who will be encountering tough times in terms of understanding with government and in terms of managing their finances. I'm tempted to say that not many people will be able to deal with it. But then what do you say to them in how they can deal with the next 6 months, possibly the next 9 to 12 months, that things will be to them, not on paper, not to IMF, not to those who are looking at how the new government is doing, but to people who are living here, how things will be undeniably tough?
Well, I think, I don't know when Obasanjo was military head of state and he talked about low profile. I believe he...
77,
yeah,
78 or so.
He decided that they were going to... But it made very good optics in the sense that they made do with all their Mercedes cars and everything, and everybody went down to a 504 car.
Yeah.
And they were driving smaller cars that were made in Nigeria.
That's right.
And things like that. And they now show that, okay, they are also part of it. Those things made good optics. And I think somebody also said during the structural adjustment that you need SAP with a human face. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very important. And this is what we're talking about, that not only leadership is about, you also have to lead by example. And I think that if we can begin to see about how the cost of governance is very high. This Oronsoye report that we're talking about, I think is very important. They need to dust it up, they need to review it, and they need to implement it. And I think that this government also needs to lead by example. As you've said, if you are telling me that things will be better for me in a year's time, then you also have to lead by example. And I think all our politicians, have gotten a bit carried away. People complain about the excessiveness of their salaries and what they have and all whatnot. So these are political and things that you also need to do to be able to ensure that your economic policies are successful.
Yeah.
Because it is a political economy. And if you do not manage the political side of things, you might be put under a lot of pressure to be able to reverse a lot of your so-called good policies.
Thank you so much. This has really been enlightening. Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, finance expert and the CEO of the CFG Advisory.